parents, and the parents would stay there until they died, and you didn't have the influx of, you didn't move ever. You never left the area, you know, and you stay there. You had your children and everything, and grandma and grandpa were in the house with you until they died, and you took care of them. Nobody was there to take care of my parents. Once the war started, and everybody went all helter-skelter. They all, you know how, well, you weren't there, but you know, everybody that never left were drafted. They went to Germany, they went to Japan, they went all over. Then they met women from other places. They didn't marry the gal down the street,
Right.
you know, or the girl they went to high school with. Some of them maybe still did, but most of them didn't, and they bring a gal from Germany home or this or that, and then they would live. Some of them then would stay in Germany and live in Germany, you know. And a lot of them came back here, but I know I went to my reunions, high school reunions was a good example of the ones that actually stayed, of my classmates, stayed in town or married somebody from town. They came from all over, and that's what happened with me then. And I felt bad about that because my mother got sick pretty young, and she ended up having a mental problem too, and I always thought it was because we all left, and my poor dad tried to take care of her. He couldn't take care of her, and we weren't there. None of us were there. My sister married somebody from Illinois. Well, my sister is another story. She went to Goshen College and met Wayne, her husband or boyfriend there. And she came home then, and I don't know if she went 1 or 2 years to Goshen College. That was a Mennonite college up by Elkhart. So she met him, and she came home and then stayed home for a couple months. And then my brother had married, got in this deal and ended up getting a divorce and married this gal. Well, she got pregnant, and they moved out to California. And they lived in California, and he was able to keep his job out there for Fisher and Porter. I told you about Fisher and Porter, and he was able to keep work. And so they lived in California for a while, and so nobody was back to help my dad. And my sister then, she one time drove with my brother, was going back, where was it, somewhere, and she drove with him on the turnpike. I remember she almost got killed. He fell asleep, and he ran into the back of a truck, and it hit him right on this side, and she had been sitting there on the passenger side. Just a little bit before that, she told him to stop. She was sleepy. She was going to get in the back seat and lay down in the back seat. And if she'd been in the front seat, she'd have been killed.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's neither here nor there. She was on her way to Illinois, to where this Wayne that she had met, and they had a thing going. And she ended up going there and getting a job, staying with him until they got married. She never went back.
Tim's interviewing her.
So,
It's 4:45.
my mother
About 6:30. So you
had
come
this
home?
mental problem, which, well, I don't even want to go into that, but
Alright.
it had something to do with what happened to her at the shore. I think when you're old, you start thinking of all this stuff that happened when you were young, and my dad didn't know how to handle
Okay, see
it,
ya. Bye.
and he would put her in. She had other things wrong with her. She had a lot of, I don't know, ailments, but they never were able to determine exactly what it was. But they ended up, my dad would put her in a local hospital. He couldn't handle her, and he put her in a local hospital there, and they would call him up and say, "You're going to have to put her somewhere else. We can't handle her here." So he had to put her in a mental institution.
Really?
It was bad. they would do those shock treatments on her.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was horrible. That's the guilt now that I didn't stay home and take care of it.
Well, it's not your fault.
Well, in a certain,
Well, I don't know. Who knows? But
that bothers me.
oftentimes those things are more biological than they are social.
are they?
Mental illnesses, yeah. I mean, not always, but a lot of it has to do with.
I thought she was starting to think of all the things as how
Could
she
be.
had my brother out of wedlock, and I know all those years the Mennonites looked down on that. And she
Yeah.
didn't have an easy life, but she still was a good woman and worked hard, and you know. But I don't know.
Some
But
water.
she, yeah, please. But she ended up. Then he would put her in an institution, and then she would get better, and she would write him. She was able to get. To write him a letter, and she'd call him out. Why did you take me here? Why did you put me here?
Mhm.
And then when I had Gary, and Gary was just a baby, I went home, and I had Grandma took care of Eddie. I didn't have Brian, of course, but I had Gary. He was a cute little baby, and I went back and stayed with my dad, and she was in a mental institution.
Did you
And
visit her?
I went and visited her, and they brought her out, and she talked with me as normal as you and I are talking, nice. She held Gary, thought he was so cute, kept kissing him and holding him. And so I went in and talked to the owner, or the doctor there that handled her.
Mm-hmm.
And I went in and talked, and I said, I'm here visiting, and I want you to, I see my mother's just doing fine. Could she please come home? Can you release her? And he said, no, she's not ready to go out yet. She's not ready. I said, well, why? She appears fine to me. And he said, you don't know what she's thinking. I said, you don't know what I'm thinking. I said, I was really mad about it because I only had, I stayed, I don't know if I stayed 3 or 4 weeks or something like that. I don't know if I stayed a month. Felt sorry for my dad. That's why I went back there to see if there was anything I could do. And Gary was a baby. I took him along.
They wouldn't do anything, huh?
Well, I couldn't get him to release her. But then later, they will, you know, let her go home. Now, the thing, she died one time, one episode there. She died there. And that always bothered me because I don't know what happened. She was in with others that were worse than her, and they did something to her. They said she had a cerebral hemorrhage. And the way my poor dad, he was working then. He was a Mennonite, had a concrete block factory, and he was going to work. He did that. And a lady came there and told him at work that he was tore up, something terrible. We all came back home, but she was only about, let's see, was she 65 or 64 years old?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something fishy, maybe.
She died in 1955. So, but I've always thought, it always haunted me that they did something to her there. You know, those asylums were bad.
Right.
What's that movie they made? A couple of movies about it.
Is that One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?
Yeah. So, that was really bad. So then my dad lived there by himself for a while, and then eventually we decided he'd come out, and he sold the house and came out and lived with us. Well, we gave him an apartment
He lived in Cedar Lake.
that apartment building next door. I don't know if you remember it, where our house was. That's one was Tony Hetzer's fish house. And we had apartments in there, and he had an apartment there. So he felt like he was paying us because he'd mow and take care of all the yard, and all that, you know. So I never knew whether it was a good move or not, because it was so different there for him than what he'd had at home. Didn't have his church. He didn't have it. But
So he sold the house and moved back?
yeah, sold the house, got $15,000 for the house in town. That house in town. So, and he had sold the farm that you saw
Right.
too.
He'd already sold that.
Yeah, 80 acres, and and the house and barn for $12,000.
Wow.
Now it's going for $12,000 for just.
You
What?
couldn't buy half the barn for 12,000.
No, you couldn't.
You couldn't buy a quarter of that barn for 12,000 probably.
That wasn't only the barn; it was a house and all
House
the
to
land.
too. Yeah.
They developed the land. All those people that bought the first people. I told you the first person that bought it was the Russian lady who trained horses, and she had horses. So she kept the whole 80 acres. Well, she got it for 12,000. So, but then later she sold it to a realtor or somebody that divided it into lots. And we didn't go up that hill, but there's beautiful homes up there, very expensive. And that's all. There was a forest up there that I always used to go up and pick these flowers that grew in the forest and bring them home to my mother. I'd always go in that forest and play and everything. Well, that's what they used for all these lots, you know. And they had beautiful, expensive homes back there. So